Welcome to the first day of the rest of your life. My name is Andy Zaremba, or that would be at Andy Zaremba on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And welcome to another episode of Vancouver Real. And with me behind the helm today for the second time is my brother Mike.
Hey everybody, nice to be with you. Thanks for joining us, and nice to be with you, Andy.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
As usual, we are recording out of 70 West Godeva Street here in Float House in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And if you haven't heard of Float House or know what floating is, you can visit the website, floathouse.ca. We have all sorts of useful information on there, which will get you more enlightened in terms of what floating is as a practice and how it can benefit your life. Or if you want, you can go to YouTube and use the video, What is Floating? And there's a really good video called What is Floating? And it gives you a quick 6 to 7 minute synopsis on all the benefits and what you'd be getting yourself into if you wanted to give it a shot. And if you feel like giving floating a try, you can use the promo code VancouverReal, and that will get you a 20% discount on a single float.
Excellent. And I just want to make a quick announcement and acknowledge the Vancouver Rail community. We do regular meetups in different ways, shapes, and form. We have one coming up on April 11th, if we can squeak this out in time. I think we will.
Yeah.
Where we're doing a collaboration between Vancouver Rail, Float House, and Ontogeny Center, where Dr. Carlos De Leon is the lead facilitator at that place. And we're actually going to be doing a workshop. I think not a workshop, excuse me. A lecture he's going to deliver, 2 hours, which is free, about shamanism. So it's going to be really interesting, and it's a really cool opportunity to bring together these three different communities and just explore an interesting topic together. So April 11th, check it out on Ontogeny's Facebook page. I believe there's an event, and we'll probably have some posts coming out about it soon. So just scroll back in the feed.
And if not that, go to the Vancouver Real meetup page, it's a group page on Facebook, and just we'll accept you onto the page, and then you can stay up to date on all future events. Or go to vancouverreal.tv under the events tab.
Yes, exactly.
And lastly, I'm going to give a shout out to the Mindful Mass Vancouver Meditation Flash Mob. Mm-hmm. Said that correctly.
Oh, that's it? Awesome.
I think so. And what we do is basically hold quarterly mass meditations. So we'll go to a public space. We've done one at Sunset Beach. We did one at the Art Gallery. We've done one in Woodward's Atrium. So we move it around. And we do giant mass meditations all for free. So if you'd like to come out and be a part of that community and get a free meditation led by Carolyn Ann Budgell, an amazing local yoga teacher and meditation teacher, link up with us at Mindful Mass on Facebook, or mindfulmass.org is the website.
Perfect.
Yeah. So that's it for announcements. But today is the last installment of the TEDx Stanley Park series. And unfortunately, we won't be able to get it up before TEDx Stanley Park because we're only a few days away. But it is my privilege to announce Roger Wong as our guest today. So Roger, welcome to Vancouver Real.
Well, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here with you today.
So Roger, when I looked at your credentials online, and I if you want to Google search Roger Wong, you can see his credentials. You got a lot of letters behind your name.
Right.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you could just if you could sum up exactly what some of those credentials are and what you do.
Sure, absolutely. Delighted to do that. So I am a geriatrics doctor. So I'm a doctor who specializes in the care for older people, seniors. And at the same time, I'm a clinical professor in the Faculty of Medicine at UBC, University of British Columbia. And one of the things that I do, in addition to looking after seniors, is I train up future doctors and health practitioners and professionals. So I'm the Executive Associate Dean in the Faculty of Medicine in the medical school. And at my free time, I also do some other volunteering activities. Most notably, I was the president of the Canadian Geriatrics Society for a number of years, which basically is the head geriatrics doctor for Canada. And I think that's good enough.
I think that gives you some credentials to go by. Yeah, I'm glad you did that introduction. And you're also on Twitter, you said.
Yes,
Don't forget the Twitter. What's your Twitter handle?
Absolutely. My handle is Roger Wong 10.
Roger Wong 10. Follow him on Twitter, folks.
Yes.
So, how we start off these talks, usually with the TEDx speakers, is we give you an opportunity to, let you discuss your talk, your topic, why you chose it, and why it's important.
Yeah, well, I'm very, very excited about the upcoming TED Talk. And again, this TEDx Stanley Park being,
On March 3rd, by the way.
I know, which
Yeah.
is just a few days away.
Yeah.
And by the time this broadcast goes out, it probably would be
It will be,
afterwards.
yes, yes.
But it is a phenomenal opportunity for me to share with the audience, both a live audience and online audience, something about seniors, something that we all care a lot about. My topic is called To Stay or Not to Stay. So basically what I'm going to be talking about will be how can we use technology and our own compassion to help extend senior living at home. So talking about, and we can go over some details if you like, what are some of the advantages of living around at home for older people, but also for younger people, a community sense.
Well, I think this is something that is important to a lot of people, or will be important to everybody at some point in time, because eventually we're all going to be there, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, why don't we start there? Why don't you talk about maybe the meat of your talk, and what are some of the pros and cons of maybe putting somebody in a long-term care facility or keeping them at home, or challenges associated with that? Or I'll let you take it. Why don't you go from there?
Absolutely. Well, let me share with you a real story. So as a doctor who have looked after seniors over the years, and I've seen a lot of them, like thousands of seniors, oftentimes when the person comes in to seeing me as the doctor, their family and friends could be with them, and a lot of them have a question. They say, well, you know what, Dr. Wong, I am now whatever years old, and insert your own number. Does it mean that automatically I should go and look into a care facility? Should I move into a care facility? So that is a very common question. And it occurs to me that obviously on a one-on-one basis as a doctor to a patient, I can explain that. But then it occurs to me, geez, wouldn't it be nice if we can actually get the message out to the general public, maybe through the TEDx platform, through this podcast, really to help people understand that age, we're all aging, let's put it this way. Like even as we are talking about it, we are getting older. But age is only a number, and life is more than a number. And then kind of the thing that I often talk about is, it doesn't mean that when we reach the age of a particular number, then we have to do certain things. And in this example, it means like, it doesn't mean automatically moving out of your home and into a care facility. And that's kind of the central message that I want to share with the audience, both live and online. And then obviously giving people some tools to be thinking about and to using to hopefully inspire people to doing things that can help them stay longer at home.
Interesting. So increasing that the longevity of someone's independence. Really.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, because living life is very much about functionality. It's about what we do, right? It's not so much, now clearly it is important that we all kind of can breathe and can eat and can walk and can talk, but life is more than that. So a lot of times we know that not just for seniors, for everybody, but staying at home in your own community comes with certain advantages. They're good things that happen. When we are in our familiar surrounding.
What are some of those advantages?
Yeah, so when we're in our own surroundings, for instance, we know exactly where everything is. And in particular, if, let's say sometimes we have difficulty with our walking for whatever reason, there's an injury or there's arthritis affecting seniors or whatever, then knowing exactly the layout of your furniture, of your own home, means it is easier for you to move around, as opposed to going to a new environment and you don't know where everything is and you may bump into things and accidents can happen. So that's one example. But more importantly, if you are able to live longer at home, you can hang out with people, your own community, for longer. So the classic example that comes to mind would be neighbors and friends within the community, because having them around and supporting you, it can be really important. Something that I'm going to talk about during my TEDx talk is this importance of remaining in a community.
I got a quick question around that, actually, and I'm curious, what, if any, like sort of empirical research is surrounding that element, the community and aging and geriatrics. Like, is there anything really interesting you can kind of share about that?
There is. So in my TEDx talk, I'm going to be talking about the importance of that community sense, because there is now evidence to suggest that seniors who actually do not have that sense of community can get into real health trouble. So in other words, the connection between the community living, that socialization, as well as health actually is very real. It's something that people didn't used to think about it. Now we know, for instance, that people who are socially isolated, they actually have poorer health.
Now, do you think that, does the evidence show any indicators as to whether that's just because of an overall like connection piece that's happening with that community, and just this, that older person is just healthier because they feel better and they feel more purposeful and connected? Or is it actually more of like a mechanical thing of like, well, there's more likely someone there to support you and help you? Or is it both? Like, what is it showing?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Mike. I think it's actually a combination of everything that you have mentioned.
Okay.
So clearly, when we look at the evidence in the literature, we know that when there are certain numbers and observations and we can report back, and then oftentimes we go back and try to explain the reasons.
Sure.
So definitely the extra help and support is important. Definitely the general feeling of happiness, the sense of belonging is important. Obviously, does it mean there could be biologic reasons to explain? I mean, that part is something to be explored yet.
Right. Well, and just that whole mind-body connection, we know the way you feel and the way you think will affect you physiologically as well.
Absolutely. So that is very true. So we do know that when people get into trouble, for instance, and they try to go through rehab, like go through exercise and things, we know that there is now good evidence to say whatever is good for the body is good for the brain as well, and then vice versa. So there clearly is a connection.
Totally. Very cool.
Now, I want to get into a little bit about the idea of using technology and compassion. Those are two components of your talk.
Right.
How do those play into caring for seniors or geriatrics when they get into older age?
Yeah. Well, let's start off with technology, perhaps. So, in this day and age, in 2018, the kind of things that we can do with technology obviously is very different compared to when we're looking at seniors when they were younger people, when they were younger adults. A good example, for instance, is how do we use mobile technology? How do we use smartphones, cell phones? I'm going to be talking about that during the TEDx talk, so stay tuned for that. But also the whole wide world of the internet and the availability of information. There's so much information.
So
there.
like big data on...
Exactly. So some of the work that, I'm actually a keynote speaker in a number of international conferences. And I was recently in London, England, talking as the Trevor Howell Lecturer, which is like the keynote lecturer of the year at the British Geriatric Society. So the audience was a group of British doctors and nurses and social workers. And there I talk about like the future hospital for older people. What does it look like? And some of the things that we talk about is using that data science, so-called big data. How do we use numbers and data to help inform us? Let me give you an actual example. If you're talking about a senior person who actually tends to fall, so there are accidents that happen, obviously that can be quite serious. And let's say if for whatever reason someone falls and then break a hip or something, which is really tragic, which is very, very serious. Now, basically, the using of data can be done in such a way to prepare the person's kind of requirement to go to a hospital, to have surgery done and so on. Like, for example, there are now gadgets or devices that you can put on the flooring of home that can detect any change in pressure. So when a person falls, the flooring would pick up a signal. That means there's a sudden change in the pressure, and that signal can be transmitted, say, to a hospital, whereby people will be alerted, oh, this person living in the neighborhood possibly had a fall.
Right.
And then obviously depending on the way how the fall happens, so the direction and the magnitude of the signal, they can predict what is the likelihood of a broken bone.
Wow.
That's so crazy.
And in fact, and with that, then you move on and say, okay, the person clearly needs to come into the hospital, but you can actually start pulling up the person's medical file, for instance, what kind of medicines they're using in case they need to receive treatment in the hospital, so they will have the history, the story up. And in fact, you can get the x-ray rooms ready to take x-rays of whatever bone that could be broken.
Right. So
And
it expedites the entire process.
Exactly. It's smoothing out that process, right? And this is one aspect, for instance. Now, obviously, are we there yet? Not exactly, but can we be there? Yes, the technology is possible.
You know, one thing I find a little bit interesting from, let's just say from an entrepreneurial sense, is that we have an aging population for sure. So, and there's going to be a lot of needs for this stuff in the future as the baby boomers move in and become seniors. Then we're going to need to, you know, have more care and more, you know, there's potentially a lot of opportunity for people who are looking for something in that realm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was any other sort of technologies that are coming out that you know of that are pretty innovative.
There is. One of the things that, so Andy, I was actually in San Francisco at the World Congress of Geriatrics as an invited plenary speaker. That was last summer. And one of the things that I did, again, I was giving a plenary lecture on what is the future of senior care. And a local person from San Francisco came to me afterwards and started talking to me about his product. So he owns a startup company, and he had what he had created is an avatar. So an avatar actually, which is on a tablet computer, that can try to provide a personalized service to seniors who are living alone. So for instance, the avatar, you can have a choice of whether you want it to be a cat or a dog. And then you can name the avatar different things, and you can basically speak to the avatar on the computer tablet and say, for instance, I want to see my family. And the family could be living distances apart.
Right.
And in fact, what they would do is they would now go onto the internet and search for the social media profiles of these family members and bring on, say, on Skype or FaceTime, you know, that kind of thing.
Which is great because it makes the technology more user-friendly, where some seniors are not comfortable with it.
That's right. Yeah. So it is one simple tap in a tablet computer now that you can even get a grocery delivered from supermarkets.
See, that's interesting. Yeah.
To your kitchen, into your fridge. And in fact, that service is available.
Sure.
In
there also is like meal prep services as well.
Absolutely.
You know, so the interesting thing about all that is that it could really help the senior citizens in their transition and be able to live independently for longer. But one thing that comes to mind for me is, you know, it's great to have all this technology, but it's like we don't want to tech our way out of caring for our parents or the elderly. You know what I mean?
That's right.
So, you know, there are these technological innovations like you've mentioned. I was wondering more if you could speak on the compassion piece and what you meant by that.
And that's really important, and which is why I began by saying that there really are two components, and the two components, they are interdependent on each other. I mean, technology is good, but you need to think about how do you utilize it in order to augment or exemplify some of the things that all of us are really looking for. We're looking for love and care and support. So that compassion comes from within, from the heart, which is really the motivation or the driver of why we do certain things. So let me give you an example. There's a very good example is for seniors who live alone. For many cultures and communities, meal times are very important, not only for sustenance, but also because it is an opportunity to socialize with family. Many families live very countries apart. So one of the ways how you can combine the compassion piece with technology, for instance, Now, even though it's still not ideal, what people would do is they would try to broadcast video family members during meal time of the older person. So they will be eating next to a big screen, a monitor,
Yeah.
with family interacting with them. Now, ideally, you would love to have real people eating with you.
Of course.
But oftentimes that may not be possible, especially when the grandparents want to see grandkids and so on who can live in different countries and continents.
Yeah.
But this is one way of bringing in, and that technology combined with compassion, because you're applying it in that very compassionate way, has been studied. And people know that some early returns, some early findings suggest that people actually, they prefer real people, without a question, but that is better than not having anybody.
You know, the funny thing is that happens now. I mean, people, you know, my partner, my fiance's parents will frequently Skype into dinners and conversations and things like that. So
Absolutely.
it's totally right there already.
Well, and just wait till virtual reality kind of really becomes a little more. And you literally just boop, and you're there.
That's
You know,
right.
and that technology
That's
is
right.
developed really, really well. Like
Yeah.
everyone's having a phone will have their at-home VR, and they'll just plunk that on,
Yeah.
and you'll be right there, whether it's watching the kids open presents on their birthday or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think it's a real opportunity in particular, and since we are in the Lower Mainland in Vancouver, if you look at some of the technological development in the structure, so with the supercluster, for instance, being announced, really exciting opportunity. One of the things that people are talking about in the tech world is mixed reality now. So you have virtual reality
Right.
And
then-
augmented reality.
and augmented reality, and you mix. So what does mixed reality mean now? Obviously, one of the things is when you apply it to anybody, including seniors, there is a bit of a learning curve. I mean, the learning curve can be steep, and a lot of times, all of us kind of understand that we need to be more patient, spend more time, in particular with seniors, in trying to get the learning curve piece kind of overcome. But once that is true, and once, you know, this whole mixed reality concept, like what you're saying, Mike, I totally agree, because it can feel very, very real.
Yeah, very, very real.
Yeah.
What was the thing you called mega cluster?
yeah, what
A
is that?
supercluster.
What's
Super
that?
cluster.
Yeah. So supercluster actually is just announced by the federal government. So about a couple weeks ago. So geographically, in each area, there are big consortium of businesses and universities and communities trying to get together on a particular theme. The supercluster that has been announced for British Columbia is the technology supercluster tech. So there are other superclusters. There's one on ocean, there's one on forestry, there's one on manufacturing. But the one in the West Coast for us is tech.
So is that like a program working with the government to maybe incentivize tech companies to come to British Columbia? Is that what it is?
It is, but in fact, lots of partners already are involved in that announcement. If you look at some of the big names in technology, Microsoft, for instance, and so on. Not trying to advertise for them, but you know, they're already in there, and a lot of startup companies in the Lower Mainland in British Columbia are already involved. The academics are involved, and obviously, for someone like myself, as a professor and as a geriatrics doctor, one of the questions I have is, what does that mean to really transforming the life for seniors? And that example that I just shared, right? That mixed reality.
Yeah.
is
One
a
of
good one.
one of the other areas I would be interested in would be maybe robotics technology. You know, with that coming along too. I mean, that's if you had something that could really take care and take care of the person's space, or who knows where that could go eventually.
Yeah, and in fact, the whole issue of AI, in particular machine learning, is taking on some new directions. Now, having said all that, again, coming back to what you're asking about, Andy, and I completely agree, that compassion piece, you know, cannot be completely overshadowed by technology, because I think technology without compassion is simply technology. But technology with compassion can really mean better quality of life, can really mean a special meaning, like adding meaning to life. And that's what we're talking about. That compassion piece is not something that we necessarily can teach people. I think it is intrinsic in everybody, but what can we do to bring that particular component up? And I think this is where, for each and every one of us, our own belief system, our own value system as we grow up. Many of the things that we see as we are kids and then we're becoming adults and so on, those patterns tend to continue. And it is something which is why, one of the reasons why I'm talking about this during the TEDx this year, about to stay or not to stay at home, basically, is what I'm talking about, has to do with the fact that a lot of times when family members, they're very compassionate, they're trying to keep their senior living at home, but they get so stressed out and things get very difficult, and therefore making that decision of when or if they should move out of the home into a care facility can become very, very difficult. And that is why I am very excited to be able to share some tips and some tools during this TEDx talk in terms of gauging that particular piece.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, because it would be sort of a sliding scale in a sense where it's like, well, you know, someone's at this level of capability, but can they have an at-home caretaker? Can we use some certain level of technology to assist them for a little bit longer? So how do we assess, you know, where they are, or do they need to go to a facility?
Absolutely. So each person is very unique. Each family situation is very unique. And as a geriatric specialist doctor, my learning over the years is that when I'm looking at an older person, it's never looking at that single person. It's that person plus the family and friends around them. It's that community, that you know, that real time community setting. And that is so important because if you are looking at what you describe as that scale of things, of how you can support that person, we must also remember the stress and oftentimes, sometimes the burden that is placed on the care providers. And what does that mean? So if I can share an example with you, in seniors, a common condition that we see is dementia or Alzheimer's disease. So the memory gets into real trouble affecting day-to-day function. It is, so sometimes people come in and say, hey, Dr. Wong, this is a situation of Alzheimer's disease. Doesn't mean, even though the person could be very mild or early in the disease, doesn't mean the person have to move out of home and into a care facility right away. And the answer is no, not necessarily. But then we figure out how do we use technology and compassion to supporting. And as things progress and develops into more serious disease, serious condition, the burden and the stress and the pressure points start to mount. We know now that care providers for seniors with dementia, with Alzheimer's disease, are more likely to experience mental health problems themselves. They are more likely to have depression. They're more likely to have what we call mood disorders. So we never just deal with a single person in geriatrics. We always deal with the family and the loved ones. It's the whole community. It's the whole set.
The whole support system supporting that person is critical, because I mean, if the caretakers, you know, parents, whatever, children of the elderly person are breaking down, well, that's not really going to be all that useful. I had a question I was going to go into on that note, but you know, one of the things I've been thinking of for a long time is just the idea of community living, multi-generational households.
Right.
You know, and it seems like you know, in different cultures that is prevalent, but not so much in North America.
Right.
And it is like a lifestyle thing. It's just a cultural thing. What do you think? Is that a potential solution for some of these things?
I think, first of all, you know, the disclaimer statement to make is every situation is unique, right? So I certainly have witnessed many families with multi-generation kind of within the same household when things are working out beautifully. I clearly have seen that, including sometimes when the seniors within the household may have some health difficulty, sometimes memory difficulty, and so on. It can work. I've also seen the reverse. I've also seen situations whereby there is, unfortunately, a lot of conflict, a lot of pressure, and things are just not working out. So the first thing, my learning over the years of looking after seniors, is that each situation is unique and different, and therefore we try to provide tailored service and advice to that particular family, that household. this is important because a lot of times seniors and family would come by and they say, oh, my neighbor is doing this. It seems to work. How about us? And it may or may not work. And so
Right.
that's
So that's
really
where your
important.
assessment tool comes into play.
Exactly. And the way how the geriatrics doctor would do that work, there's an approach, is called comprehensive geriatric assessment, or CGA, which basically is a very holistic approach of looking at the whole person. And I think many of us now that we get it, that a holistic approach is better than just a kind of a truncated, a piecemeal approach. Having said that, I think there are many reasons that people can give that if you have more people in the household, then there are more bodies to deploy, to help out and to support and to share the load and share the
Yeah.
burden. It can be helpful.
So it can be.
It
a
can be
solution.
helpful. That's right.
You know, one of the things I've heard too around seniors is, and this is a little, maybe a rule of thumb. I heard about it in maybe long-term care facilities, but the rule is, don't let, don't do things for them that they can do for themselves. Like help them keep their independence as high as possible, even if they're in a long-term care facility. Even like in a multi-generational household, potentially that grandparent can actually help raise the grandkids or something like that. It depending on
Right.
what level or stages they're at, right?
Right.
But I guess what I'm asking is like, how do you feel about the idea of keeping somebody as independent as possible before moving them into
Yeah.
a situation?
I
like that?
absolutely agree, Andy. I think the important thing is we emphasize function. So function is a big driver. And therefore, oftentimes, if you hear about the old saying, like you use it or lose it kind of thing,
Yeah.
to a certain extent, it is true. If you continue to use a body function and a particular type of movement or, whatever physical activity, or mental activity for that matter, the person can actually stay on functioning for longer. So keeping independence from a functional point of view for as long as possible is absolutely meaningful and the way to go. I would suggest that in doing so, the biggest question that all of us as family or friends or loved ones or doctors that we're thinking about is the issue of safety. So you will balance that with safety. So let me give you one example. Lots of seniors, they love gardening. And maintaining their gardening as a habit in their own backyard, in the in the porches or whatever, is all good, provided that they are safe when doing that. So I have people who tend to fall every time they try to hunch over, and then if they are trying to kind of go into very bizarre positions in the garden or the backyard, then the families get very, very worried. They go, oh my God, they're gonna fall. So that's one example that, thinking about safety is always important, because safety is kind of really important to keeping people home for longer.
Right. Interesting. Back to the idea of seniors being isolated. Now, that's one thing that I think a lot of people, they know, but they don't really know. When my grandfather was aging, I made it a practice. Like I would call him at least once a week. That was my thing. I'm like, if I'm calling him once, he lives in Ontario, I was here, so I'm like, I felt like a once a week phone call. I'm like, I felt like I was doing, I felt that was the right thing to do.
Yes.
But there's a lot of seniors out there that are alone, and I think that's one
right.
thing that people don't really realize. Like I used to work at this distress center in Ontario.
Yes.
And a lot of times we get senior callers that would call in just because they wanted to talk to somebody because they were so alone.
That's right.
So again, I guess that sort of plays into that compassion piece of having, hopefully, the family.
That's
But
right.
what about somebody who's in a situation that they don't have people around them?
Yeah. Well, I think the example that you gave, Andy, and thank you for sharing that, is very powerful. So to have family, grandkids, or great-grandkids calling seniors, or contacting, or FaceTime, or Skype, or whatever, it means a lot. It means a lot not only from the recipient point of view, from the senior, because it adds to the quality of life, but I think also for us as family members who can feel that, yes, I've done something for grandpa. This is important.
Yeah.
And I think it's a two-way street. Like that compassion actually feedback is really important. But there are many people who do not have the luxury, who are staying alone or whatever. So one of the big things is we try to ask the question, can there be programs or day programs, adult day programs that we can enroll people in? And ideally, physical activity programs, exercise programs, So a good example, again, if I may, I gave the example of someone with Alzheimer's disease before, with dementia. We now know that the problem is in the brain, but physical activity, exercise, actually can be helpful. So this is another demonstration of that connection between the body and the mind. So there are now programs that actually get seniors with early Alzheimer's disease, for instance, to go to regular exercise. They will go to spin classes, they will go to do yoga, they will do different things.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so in fact, the name, the term that they try to brand and they try to coin this is called Minds in Motion, which is really cool if you think about it. And you're trying to, so there's motion, there's physical activity.
Exercise of some sort.
Yeah, so this is something that is endorsed by the Alzheimer's Society of Canada, and with multiple chapters in every province and jurisdiction. So that's one example. But you don't need to wait till someone has dementia to get physically active. I think physical activity is so important.
Sure.
Exercise is very important.
Sure, I think so. Like if you can maintain that for as long as you can, it just
Absolutely.
seems like that's so beneficial for people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I would say any physical activity, provided it's done safely, can be helpful.
If let's say there's somebody out there listening today that is in this situation where they have an aging family member, which probably a lot of people do.
Yeah, that's right.
What are some resources for those people that they could, if they want to learn more or potentially get help for them?
So I think, again, thinking about in British Columbia, in the Lower Mainland, in the Vancouver area, there are many not-for-profit organizations who actually organize these kind of services. Big categories that I would share at this point will be what I described, for instance, adult day programs. Community centers oftentimes have exercise classes. Sometimes going to universities, going back to school to take a course in art or history, it can be very helpful.
Sure, yeah.
I was interviewed recently, a couple of years ago, in fact, about the value of taking on classes for seniors.
Just continuous learning.
Does UBC have any like senior discounts for dropping classes or anything like that?
UBC, we offer a variety of different kind of career and personal classes. I'm not trying to advertise, but in fact, it can be very much tailored to individual interests and things. So yeah, we offer a lot of options.
Very cool.
Awesome. Well, how are we doing there, Mike?
We are 37 minutes. So we're getting
Okay.
close.
Is there anything today that you feel that is really important that we haven't touched on that you'd like to get out?
Well, I think we cover a lot of ground, and I'm very glad that we're able to share that information. At the end of the day, I did allude to this point before. There are going to be times when, despite maximum effort to keeping the senior person at home, it may be appropriate to move into a care facility. So maybe we can talk a little bit about
Yes,
that.
that's a good idea.
And I think that's important because a lot of times, again, as a geriatric specialist doctor, when for family, in particular for family, when they're making that decision, they feel very, very stressed out. And I totally understand because it is a difficult decision. I would say that, and I spoke about the importance of safety. If for whatever reason, staying at home is no longer safe, I think that is an important time when we ask the question, so how can we enhance the safety? So we will use the things that I'm going to be talking about in the TEDx talk, the technology and a compassion and support system. But even despite that, if things are still not safe, then I think we need to seriously think about kind of moving into a care facility kind of setting. Another common example is if the family is totally burned out. And caregiver burnout is actually common. And again, we spoke about it, their own mental health situation. And a lot of times, family who are providing care for seniors, they also have their own families. So they are sandwiched in between. They have young kids.
And careers, probably.
And careers. And so all of a sudden, and it's not uncommon that people are managing multiple households concurrently at the same time. It's exhausting. So that is also really important. And then obviously there are some very specific reasons why people may need to get the help from a care facility. A good example, for instance, is if someone who cannot walk at all. Another good example is if someone who is so forgetful of taking medications, and despite using all kinds of different tools and the different computer tablets to remind you, wearable devices, we now have watches that will remind you, despite all that, if all else fails. So you need to be thinking about it. So I think it should be, it is important for us to say, when it is for the right reasons, there is going to be a right time for people to consider moving out of the home and into a care facility, but only after considering all the things that we've been talking about today.
Right. So again, it's that whole holistic assessment that you're talking about.
Totally.
Are there a lot of these facilities out there, or like, are there lots of options, and are they affordable, and how much gets subsidized, or
Yeah.
how does that work?
So in British Columbia, in the Lower Mainland area, there are many options available for different kind of support, whether it is a full kind of support of care facility or assisted living or supportive housing. There are many different options. So a very important resource, and this is something that I should mention, a resource for families, in particular, or seniors who are looking into those options, will be to contact the local health unit, the community care portion of the local health unit, depending on where you live, because they do provide kind of free advice and assessment for our seniors and who may require further help.
So by health unit, you mean like Vancouver Coastal Health? Is that the health unit? Or?
That's right. So if you live in Vancouver, it's Vancouver Coastal Health.
Right.
So if you live in the Fraser Valley, it's Fraser Health.
Yeah.
If you're in the north, it's Northern Health.
Okay.
And we have like 7 different health authorities
BC.
in the province.
Gotcha.
Right.
Cool.
Yes. Is there enough? Are there enough facilities to meet the demand currently?
Well, it's an interesting question, Andy, because if you ask the question, do we have enough beds for people who want to move in? I would say by and large, yes. But then you have to remember that typically there's a waiting time to get into a facility. And a lot of times it's getting the right decision made at the right time also takes some time. So if you understand what I'm saying, there's some lag time between the initial thought and the actual movement into the facility.
Right.
I will emphasize, however, that again, the preferred way to do this is what we call aging in place. I mean, that's the whole concept that we're talking about. Yeah, for every one of us to age in our own familiar surrounding. That aging in place concept usually means your home setting. But let's say for whatever reason you need to move into a care facility, then what we advocate for is actually minimizing the number of moves. So in other words, you don't keep moving all the time. And once you make a move, what I advise people is once you make a move, make sure there's some potential, some capacity for the person to stay there for some time, despite the fact that their needs may be escalating.
Yeah, that's big for sure. I could see that. Well, that's a very interesting topic of conversation, and I'm sure that this is going to be a very useful talk, and this podcast will be very useful as well, because everybody's going to be in that situation at some point in their life. If it's not them now, it's going to be a family member, so it's something that's going to affect us all. So
absolutely.
Yeah,
No, I'm delighted that we have this opportunity to talk and to share, and I hope that this podcast will be helpful for a lot of people.
I think it will be. All right, so, and what's your Twitter handle again?
So it's Roger Wong 10.
Roger Wong 10 on Twitter,
Hit
and
him
that's
up.
probably the best way for people in the public just to contact you if
Absolutely.
they want to. They can tweet at you.
Absolutely.
Are you like up late at night tweeting at people? No, like some
Tweeting
like
Donald Trump back
the
and forth?
unnamed presidents.
Yeah,
No?
yeah, that's right. No.
That's good. I didn't think so.
Yeah.
I didn't
Nothing too political.
No.
Okay, Roger. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, and I'm really looking forward to your talk. Oh, and by the way, if you want to watch, all these TEDx Stanley Parks talks will be on YouTube eventually. So after you're done watching this episode on YouTube, you can go over and actually, there's a good chance his little video will pop up right under this one on YouTube. So you can just click that little thing or
Yep.
play next, and you can watch Roger again on the big stage at TEDx Stanley Park or any of the other speakers that we've interviewed. So thanks again.
Great. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
And of course, if you like what you heard today, if you could leave us a rating, a review, a like, a comment, share, tag a friend that might be interested in this podcast. It's
right.
all really useful. If you want to try floating, it's a good thing. If you have like maybe an aged person with arthritis or something like that, that might be a good tool.
Or you're
for
that
them.
burnt out caregiver.
Or the burnt
That's
out
what I was
caregiver.
thinking in my
Actually,
mind.
that's even potentially.
I was like, we should
Yeah.
create a program around caregiver
even
burnout.
for like newly parents as well, like
Sure.
new parents. That's even that temporary space is exhausting, right?
Totally.
So if you'd like to try floating, you can use the promo code Vancouver Real. That will get you a 20% discount on a single float, and of course, all of our community meetups at Vancouver Real Meetups or Mindful Mass, and that's it.
Check it out.
all she
Thank
wrote.
you. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Yeah, so Andy Zaremba on Instagram and Twitter, Facebook. Mike, you want to give out your social handles since you're such a social media fiend?
They're dormant right now, so it's all good.
You log in once a week or so.
Oh, it's low.
Okay. Well, anyway.
I'm in baby mode.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
listening, everyone, and until next time,
To whatever is.
to whatever is.